So welcome to the Kanban Coaching Exchange, everybody. Hope you're all well. Everything's not too bad here in London, so we're looking forward to a great evening tonight with the fabulous Daidree telling us all about how we can help coach some of those senior leaders. I first met Daidree a few months ago, and that was through her current organisation, Genomics England, looking to engage with some Kanban training. And it was actually my first in-person class that I have done for nearly 3 years. So obviously it felt like I was the new girl again, whilst also trying not to kind of kick off and have challenges around like timelines and things like that. So I want to welcome here tonight. So welcome aboard, Daidree. I'm looking forward to your talk. And, you know, the one thing that I did notice about my time with you is that it was great to have you in that training. And for me, that was quite inspirational to see you there working with the teams and working to look to see how we can improve things in Genomics England. So welcome to the Kanban Coaching Exchange. I will hand over to you.
Thank you. And I see one of my teammates here. Hey, Danny. How you doing? Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. I had a last-minute computer change, so hopefully all of my tech ends up working, but you'll just have to give me one moment to share my screen. And I think away we go. So welcome to my talk. Very nice to be here with you all this evening. And tonight I will be talking about coaching leaders, how to get it right and how to get it really, really wrong. And you might hear my daughter screaming in the background, so I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that. She's very charming this time of night. So anyway, who am I? I am Daidree. That is like daydream without the M. I started out very, very briefly as a software developer. That was, as I just said, a very brief stint. That was about 16 years ago. And then kind of went project manager, Scrum Master, Agile Coach, Enterprise Agile Coach. For the last 4 years, specifically, I've been doing the things that that it says right on the screen, which is I've been helping leadership navigate mindset shifts needed to be effective in complex environments, role model new behaviors, hone their own unique leadership style, and create effective, well-aligned leadership and executive teams. Now I am a director myself, so I get to practice all the things that I've been preaching, and it's very hard, and I have a whole new level of empathy for all of these poor leaders that I've been working with. Before I dig into the content of some tips and tricks, would love to frame up the advice that I'll go over in this presentation with the kind of following well-known and oft-lamented scenario. So we have a team. Maybe it's a team of teams. Maybe it's a whole grassroots agile movement, and they are working in agile, and it's going great. They're gelling really well. They're delivering value early and often. They're just doing a great job. Unfortunately, the whole systemic change that we really, really want to see when we're thinking about whole organizational agility, it's being blocked by anti-pattern leadership behaviors. These anti-pattern leadership behaviors could be any number of things. So leadership could be fixing time or scope. They could be micromanaging, so kind of getting in the weeds whilst not setting vision and kind of ignoring that. They might be maintaining too much decision-making authority in the team from the teams and like not delegating. Whatever that looks like, leadership is kind of blocking your blossoming agility at the team level. In this kind of scenario, and the advice that I'll be pitching to you, you are an agile coach or some sort of change agent in the organization. You're not an executive coach or a life coach kind of brought in specifically to coach leadership, because then you would have already hopefully had your in to have time with them. But you're brought in as an agile coach working with the teams. You have a lot of different hats on as an agile coach, as we know. So you're not only just a coach, you're mentor, teacher, facilitator, all of these things. So you're kind of the multifaceted agile coach being blocked by leadership. In this talk, I'll cover 3 main sections. So 1, tips for getting in the door with your leadership team. 2, tips for success once you've established a coaching relationship. And 3, tips for how to mess everything up, with some harrowing personal tales of my own personal coaching flops, which I'm very happy to share with you all here and hopefully have you learn from them so that you don't make the same mistakes that I do. Right, so before digging into the content, I invite you to, first of all, kind of step one, do not pass go until you start to rethink the us versus them dynamic that can very easily happen in this kind of scenario where we think, oh, we're the teams, we're here for agility. It's that darn old leadership that's getting in the way, and they're awful, and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're talking about. It's very easy to fall into this dynamic, I think, when you're in the scenario, and to be upset, and yeah, to create that us versus them. But I invite you to have a little bit of a think, put yourself in leadership shoes. So maybe this leadership person that you're having to deal with, maybe it's a Harvard MBA. Who, very smart person, had some startups, created some startups, sold them off, very successful in that kind of way, spent some time in consultancy, and maybe he's now a director who has a whole team of, maybe it's 80, 250 people, something like that. But really it's the first time leading at scale, and it's his first time in that position. Or maybe you have another leader who has been in the organization for a really long time, 20 years, kind of a lifer. She's gotten very successful being where she is and acting how she's acting. Obviously, she's in a leadership position. But now something's changed. Maybe the environment's changed. Maybe the dynamic in the organization's changed. And it's that kind of what got you here is not going to get you there. But she doesn't really know how to act. Maybe she's confused. Maybe she's getting a lot of pressure from externals. So just put yourself in leadership shoes for a minute, build a little bit of empathy. And I really like this quote. This is, I think, a relationship counselor, but I really like this particular quote when thinking about this problem, which is, remember, it's not you and me versus the problem, or it is you and me versus the problem, not you versus me. So it's not me versus leadership, us versus leadership. It's all of us together kind of trying to solve the same problem for the good of whatever we're doing. That being said, let's dive in. Tips for getting in the door with your leadership team. Right, so we need to influence leadership behavior, but oftentimes we are challenged with a couple of different things when trying to get leadership's attention. So first of all, it might be access. So we just can't even really get time with them. But second of all, once we have access and we kind of get their attention, maybe our message isn't really landing and the door gets quickly shut back on us. And that's kind of end of the coaching relationship. So here's some tips with getting their attention and keeping their attention for long enough to be able to establish that coaching relationship. I think tip number one, and this is done me well in so many different environments. Find a champion. So change champions are not something I've just made up. This is a change management technique that has survived the times. Basically, we want to find people who are pro whatever change you're going for and kind of lean on them, empower them to make change. In this scenario, though, you want to find champions that are close to the leader that you would like to affect. So I'm thinking of a scenario where I was kind of ultimately targeting a CEO. I couldn't quite get to him. And there's a leadership team around him that has got a C-suite team. And there's two friendlies in the leadership team. And I know that they're friendlies and they're very easy to work with, very happy to work with me. So what I tend to do, or what I would tend to do with them is sync with them before any kind of leadership team meeting, kind of strategize with them a little bit, get them to influence the behavior from the inside, but also start to kind of preach the good word on my behalf to say, oh, you should be spending time with Daidree. I think she would be able to help you solve this problem. So that has been able to open the door to the rest of the leadership team and to the CEO. Indeed, kind of just finding that champion, just finding somebody close by that is able to influence the behavior. Second tip, I would say, and I've stolen this quote off of LinkedIn and I'll read this through you, but try to understand leadership's problems from their perspective. So we could probably go in and give them a list of the problems we think that they have, kind of that they're causing perhaps. And I think this quote's being a bit incendiary on purpose, of course, because it's LinkedIn and it's social media. But so this might sting a little for some Agilists. Almost daily Agile coaches ask me, why won't the senior leadership just listen to everything I say and take it on board? Asking a few simple questions. What things are you suggesting that would make a difference to their P&L? Agile coach response, what is a P&L? It's profit and loss, by the way. Have you shown them how the Agile operating model would look over the entire business, 70,000 employees, so that they could see the big picture? Agile coach response, they do it all. I'm not going to chase them. At this point, the Agile coach hasn't done the work. The leadership doesn't listen because they don't understand the leader, so the coach goes back to complaining and transformation fails. Again, I think this is kind of a funny comment, but I do like what it's saying, in that we do need to understand what leadership's problems are from their perspective. And if you don't know, ask. If you can get the time with them, or if you know the people around them, ask what's on their mind, what's keeping them up at night. And you might be surprised by the response. One leader I asked, I would have thought it was the upcoming merger that was keeping him up at night, but it was actually how to build up kind of the next level leadership in the organization, so that they knew what they were doing. And then another leader, I asked him what was on his mind, what was keeping him up at night, and it was staff burnout. So try to understand the problems from their perspective, and then following on to that, focus on helping them solve their problems. This is Tom Cruise saying, "Help me help you," in the bathroom. I'm not sure if you remember that from that film, but yeah. So focus on helping them solve their problems. So imagine an Agile coach walks into your office. What is the more effective way of being engaged? One, the Agile coach comes in and maybe dumps a list of problems on you, maybe comes at you with some scenario that's actually kind of outside of your paradigm, so that you're not even really quite sure what they're talking about. Or they come in and say, hey, what's on your mind? How can I help you? I want to know more about your world. I want to know more about how I can help you solve your problems. And it's a great way to kind of win friends and influence people when we're focusing on helping them solve their own problems. And finally, on getting in the door, learn to speak business. And I do have a clip. I'll send it around later. It's very funny. Unfortunately, I had to change my MacBooks last minute, so the embedded video doesn't work here. But anyway, we will skip that. And it's Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock saying a bunch of business words. I'm not saying when you need to learn how to speak business that you need to learn how to be a buzzword ipsum. That's not what I'm kind of going for here. So what do I mean? Right, learn to speak business. Structure your communication, back it up with data, and then focus on measurable impact. You'll need to kind of keep in mind that a lot of the leaders at like a higher level, if they've gone to any kind of MBA program, or if they've spent any time in consultancy, they would have had extensive training in how to structure their communication, and their minds will have started to think in that way. So if you come at them with some sort of unstructured communication that's not backed up with data, and not focusing on impact, you're gonna have trouble kind of landing your message, even if you do get in the door. So let me give you a example of what you could do if you got leadership's attention. So you could come in with the War and Peace version. So as you know, the teams are busy working on X product. They've been experiencing lots of issues with cycle times and delivering their work. They're also just not very happy. What are they not happy about? Where they feel pretty demoralized about not being able to make decisions, and they spend a lot of time waiting for other people to make decisions. I think it would be great if you would interact with the teams like more of a servant leader and delegate authority to them. Let me tell you right away that what leadership is going to hear if you come at them with this is blah, 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 blah. One of the reasons for that is that, well, there's no data in there. It's hard because of the structure of that paragraph. It was difficult to understand kind of the main call to action. It was difficult to understand what the kind of governing thought there and the main point is. There's by the way, and what I'm going to introduce right here is, and this is just going to be very brief, but this is called pyramid communication structuring. There's a really great Blinkist about this, and I can kind of send that around afterwards too. I'm very happy to. But basically, it's one way to structure communication that most business people are going to be quite attuned to. So on the left, the way it's structured, you start with the key takeaway. Then you have a main argument, you have supporting evidence, then you have another main argument, then you have supporting evidence, and it goes and goes and goes and goes. So taking that blah, 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 blah paragraph back there and putting it into a pyramid form and kind of rereading this now, it could be a little bit jargony. So I might actually take another turn on this and de-jargonify it a little bit before putting it in front of leadership. But the key takeaway would be clarifying and devolving decision-making authority about product releases will enable us to deliver value sooner. The main argument is that the current decision-making processes cause time delays, and we will have the data because we're all good Kanban practitioners, right? So we will know that work is blocked 30% of the time, awaiting decisions that happen outside of the team. Every feature we deliver spends 20 days pending enterprise architecture approvals, and employees report spending 10 hours per week preparing for steer codes and other decision meetings. So what is this? It's clear. There's a clear call to action. It's well structured. There's data, and it's focusing on impact, basically. If you do this, the hypothesis is we will be able to deliver value sooner. And wrapping up that section, tips for getting the door with your leadership team. So number 1, find a champion. 2, understand leadership's problems. 3, focus on helping them solve their problems. And 4, learn how to speak business. Right, so the chat is not questions, to making sure. Helen, do you take questions at the end? Is that how it works?
I have to admit, we've turned the sound off for everybody just in case there was any kind of like attack on you, per se. So like me and Vlad are in full damage limitation mode. Okay. But you know, we can unmute it. So if anybody's got any questions, then pop your hand up and we can unmute.
Okay, cool. So I'll just keep rolling along. But if you do have a question, just please do pop your hand up. I'm happy to temporarily stop talking so that I can hear and answer your question. Right. So Helen, I'll help. Are you moderating and looking at the chat for all that?
Yep. No questions as of yet.
Okay, cool. Right. So tips for success once you've established a coaching relationship. So let's say you've got leadership's attention, you're in the door. What do you do once you're in, right? And perhaps this is a leadership person, or perhaps it's a team. How you would kind of change your tactic a little bit, depending on what the scenario is. But first tip, and hopefully you're doing this with your teams as well, so this wouldn't be kind of anything too radical when working with leadership, but definitely make coaching plans together when you're working with leadership team, and I'll talk about this in just a second, but I'm a big fan of making coaching plans in general. So planning together, deciding what the impact looks like together, deciding what the outcomes looks like together, charting the course together, prioritizing the coaching interventions that you might take together, and then committing to that time together. I think this is particularly important when you're dealing with very busy people, and you really want to make sure that what you are doing is they feel that it's going to be high value. They feel it's going to be worth their time, and you have very explicit buy-in for what you're about to do, and it's indeed kind of co-created with them. So whether this is, and I'm thinking about a specific example of this one leadership team that I worked with in Copenhagen, where what we did is, as a team, so there was a recognition that the team was having some issues. As a team, we came together, we decided what a good leadership team would look like. We self-assessed against that. We discussed where some of the kind of weaker points were and where the stronger points were. We discussed that we wanted to focus on kind of moving the dial on this one particular area. I proposed a series of kind of workshops and like it was a combination of learning modules and but also some like content co-creation workshops with them so that they could create some better alignment. And then we measured along the way to make sure that first of all what we were doing was still kind of valuable, but that that we're actually moving that dial, which brings me to the second point, and this is really, really important as well when dealing with leadership. Again, we're dealing with people that have a lot on their plates, have a lot on their minds. They want to make sure that what they're doing is going to be having impact. So it's whether it's a change of behavior, whether it's time spent. Really, really important to think about measuring impact and the return on investment that you're able to bring to them. So thinking again about this this leadership team that I worked with, the return on investment, the impact that we had is that the leadership team, by the end of the engagement, they were self-assessing higher on alignment and understanding their roles and the overarching kind of vision and strategy. You know, job done, that's what we wanted to do. We came in, we did the thing, we had that kind of impact. But if kind of going back maybe to the devolving decision-making authority will help you deliver value sooner. That might look a little bit different because it's not just one leadership team that you're kind of measuring impact on, but it might be you're measuring impact of a whole system. Again, hopefully you have that data as a good Kanban practitioner, and you would be able to say, like, actually now we can see that the cycle time is going down because we've done these kinds of interventions, and like this kind of tweak in behavior has caused these this kind of impact, and be able to measure that impact. Of course, you want to be able to inspect and adapt along the way, but this makes it really, really powerful. This helps people feel like it's time well spent when they walk away from an engagement with you. If I could delete every other slide in this presentation and just keep one, this is the one that I would be able to keep. And Danny knows that I go on about this all the time. I'm a captain feedback, basically. Give specific and actionable feedback to leadership if you have established a coaching relationship with them. It is lonely at the top. We have a really difficult time getting feedback anyway, just as, you know, everyday people. But imagine if you are kind of at the leadership level, or perhaps even the CEO, who's going to give you feedback as a CEO. Not many people are brave enough to really do that. So if you're able to give specific and actionable feedback to leadership while you have their attention, please do it. I recommend, we've been really liking the clean language feedback model recently. There's tons of ways to give feedback, but be brave, do it, get in there. One quote, and I see a hand popped up. Let me just go over this quote and then I'll pause. One quote that I really thought was insightful here is that there's a shortage of advice at the top. So nearly 66% of CEOs do not receive coaching or leadership advice from outside consultants or coaches, while 100% of them stated that they are receptive to making changes based on feedback. And I've 100% seen this in action. There's almost nothing more valuable than having just feedback, giving you feedback based on what they're observing and what the impact it's been having. Right, question.
So Alison has a question. If you want to ask it yourself, I've enabled the unmute, or if not, I can ask it for you.
I'm happy to ask. Sorry, Daidree.
Yeah, Alison, do you want to maybe clarify that? Yeah.
Sure. It's not what's your favorite color as promised, but I did have a question. So I've been building relationships. So I'm a management consultant. I've been building relationships as part of my kind of client interactions. But as we start to kind of shift the dynamic towards kind of scaling their sort of transformation, we sort of need to move from just kind of having a good relationship and having more of like an informal, but kind of building that trust into actually kind of coaching them towards an outcome. How do you kind of pivot that relationship from sort of just building kind of trust into actually now we have an objective, now I'm actually kind of coaching you towards a particular outcome? How do you sort of change the dynamic of the terms of that relationship? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of what I would do in that situation. Because I think it's quite easy to get into the happy, fun time relationship. We're working together, but really, is it a specific kind of behavioral shift that you're wanting to see, or what is it that you're kind of hoping to coach them about?
So I guess at the moment it's been a bit of a journey to get to the point where there's trust there, based on kind of other interactions that they've had with different people, where it's felt kind of too much too soon. It's been quite a long journey to kind of get them on board, and they're starting to go, okay, this now starts to make sense in terms of where we're trying to get to from a transformation perspective. But actually, the way that we've been kind of interacting has definitely shifted the dial in terms of them sort of starting to kind of shift their behaviors as they're interacting with their teams. But actually now it's around kind of more of like the education piece around kind of agile transformations. It's actually kind of really starting to kind of create that kind of future vision for them, for their teams. It's almost kind of now we need to do the work, as opposed to just having good conversations about the theoretical. Now it's actually, now we need to actually do some work. We need to kind of build that education and almost to then scale it across this part of the organization.
Got it. And they've all kind of agreed on what good looks like, and they know how that looks in practice.
Yeah, it's starting to. Yeah.
So I mean, I without kind of knowing the full dynamic, but so some things you could do. I mean, obviously, like giving feedback. Again, we're on the feedback slide, and again, if I could delete any other slide, I would. I would delete everything but this one. So you could start with giving them some feedback around any kind of behaviors that you're currently seeing or currently not seeing. Of course, ask permission ahead of time, just to say, hey, I'm wondering if I could actually give you a little bit of feedback based on what we're currently kind of doing and what you're currently seeing. And then sometimes it's that realization that like, oh, right, I do have to have something that I need to change. Maybe you can help me change it. Sometimes that's the thing that kind of triggers the relationship to start at a different course. You could, of course, offer to come up to them and say, almost do like a bit of a pitch. So wondering if I can help you start to solve some of your issues. And I have a hypothesis that I think maybe some leadership learning modules, maybe some coaching. I think that would be kind of able to turn the dial on this. But I would just be explicit. You can't really sneak it in.
I know, that's what I'm thinking. You can't really sneak it in, can you? Which is why I'm interested, because like the dynamics shifts, right? It shifts from it being a good conversation, kind of moving the conversation forward to actually now there's an outcome. Now we need to do some work. But I like it coming from the feedback perspective. I think that would be really effective. Sorry, my kids are around, so it's going to get a bit noisy. But yeah, I like that from the perspective of the feedback. I think that would work, because then it becomes quite tangible for them.
Yeah, exactly. And then it becomes just something like a little bit more like concrete, because I think a lot of times, so, and I've seen this kind of, it's almost just like a, what they call when you're like living in two different realities, but it's like a cognitive dissonance maybe for some leadership, where they understand they're entering into a new space, they're going to have to be acting in a different way, but they're able to sort of tell themselves like, oh, I'm already a servant leader, I don't really have anything that I need to do here. Probably because they don't really know what servant leadership is, but also because they haven't really been given any of that kind of specific feedback around it. So yeah, it's a good place to start anyway, but also a little bit explicitly to say, I actually feel that you or your leadership team would benefit from some coaching, and it might not be you. And I had this slide in here actually that I deleted. Sometimes it's not you that does the coaching. Sometimes you have to bring somebody else in just because of the dynamic that you already have. Sometimes another person is actually the best person placed for the job to do the actual coaching, and then sometimes you're the one that's just opened the door. So yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Alison. My favorite color used to be yellow, but it's green now.
Thank you. I should have started with that one. Sorry.
Right.
And we have actually got another question from Dan. Dan,
yeah, I would love to answer it.
Yeah, thank you. some of my success around coaching has been more around coaching leadership teams. Because that one-to-one coaching doesn't really resonate well with people, or they don't want it, they don't understand it. But I've had a lot of success in coaching executives with their senior vice presidents, for example, and doing retrospectives, and then that can open up the door to working with them on a much closer level in helping them become more aligned, for example. So I've had a lot of success there. I use clean language as well, which can really bring some interesting thought processes and insights from people as to how well they're all working together. And because basically what I've noticed is people just don't know how to talk to one another. They don't know how to work with one another. And if you can unlock that, then great things happen. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. That's some of my successes is more at the team level than individual level.
Yeah,
so,
it's really interesting. And maybe I guess to build on that, so retrospecting is great, and then also like that first example that I gave with the team in Copenhagen, where we defined success, what success looks like, and then assessed ourselves against it. So it's that same kind of that was kind of a retrospective in a sense, where it's like we have a reflection as a collective on what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, and then we can kind of chart our course from there. Yeah. Absolutely. And then sometimes the coaching people kind of together in the dynamic, and you have to assess really what's going on. So sometimes you just have like a rogue person out going and doing stuff, and then you might not need to like coach a team. But if there's a lack of alignment or some sort of a dysfunction happening at the leadership team, then coaching just individuals within that might not be as effective as kind of what you're saying is taking the collective. Totally.
I think something I stress to my team a lot is you just got to spend time building rapport and getting to know them. I can't, the value around just building that time and listening to them can just turn into so many opportunities. And, my story, it took me 6 weeks, 6 one-to-ones, but on that 6th one-to-one, every week we talked about net. I'm in the States. So the leader I was working with, she watches The Crown. I'm British. She we thought there was a connection there, and we talked about family and life. But on that 6th one-to-one, it turned into I want your thought partnership on this, and that opened up lots of avenues as well. So I love everything that you've said here. It resonates really well with me. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Right. So again, we're kind of in the part of the talk where we've already got leadership's attention, and we're trying to figure out what to do with them. So one thing that I found is a particularly valuable thing to do with the leadership team are go and sees. And this is where you take leadership to go and see how another company is working, how another leader kind of in a similar position is working. It's the same kind of thing as you might do at the team level, actually. So if you have one team that's working really, really well, you might invite some people from another team to come see how they're working together. And then this can get a little bit tricky to try to find people that are in a relevant enough field, but not competitors, that would be willing to kind of open the door to somebody coming in and kind of having that discussion. But going and seeing how other people are working, very, very valuable. Sometimes you can just be having all these coaching conversations, and it's just not, you don't get like a quarter of the insights as you would from just that inspiration of seeing how somebody else works, and somebody in a similar situation to you. Like I know, and I didn't schedule this one, but at the current company, Genomics England, they've done some go and sees, I think, with 23andMe. So it would be not competitors, but kind of within the same realm to go understand how different organizations work. And sometimes that can be the light bulb that really helps like push leadership over the edge to a good place. Right. And then finally, roll up your sleeves. As always, take an active role in the solution. So what is patently unhelpful is to show up, coach at leadership, tell them a little bit of stuff, sprinkle some wisdom, and then go away and leave them to their own devices. What you really need, and depending on the situation, but what everybody really needs when we're thinking about agile coaching is we need a partner. And somebody to help drive change from a lasting relationship. So make a plan, stick to the plan, measure the plan, do it together, roll up your sleeves and really take that action with them. Right, and now comes the part about how to mess everything up, which really happy to walk you through these ones. So tips for how to mess everything up. And I've done most of these. There's one that I haven't done, but I've seen it enough that I thought that it would be worth bringing up. So tip number one to mess your entire coaching engagement up is arm yourself with a ton of platitudes. So maybe throw out like a start with why, throw that at them, throw out like a, oh, agile is a mindset, or like be a servant leader. Those are all really great things. They're very true. However, very non-specific, very open to interpretation. We've also heard them all quite a lot. And so this will, again, kind of come across as like blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking of the first time that I ever had the opportunity to coach someone in a leadership position. They actually asked for my time. It was great. I was like, yeah, I'm getting my opportunity to coach leadership. I had no idea what I was doing. They sat down with me. What did I do? I just sort of gave them a high level history of the Agile manifesto, and then started talking about servant leadership and how they could be more of a servant leader. And she very politely said, all right, cool, thank you for that. It was about 30 minutes, and that was the last I ever heard from her. So I think that if I would have to do it over, and I would love to rewind that one, because she really would have been just a really great person to work with and to partner with. Definitely would have sat down, tried to understand her problems, asked a lot of questions, and then partner with her on some solution going forward. It wouldn't have been a one-off, really high-level conversation. Another really great way to tank a coaching relationship is, and this is related to the first point, but to keep it really theoretical. So somebody comes and asks you a specific, point of advice or something to do, and you come at them with some, chunk of complexity theory or something, which is, again, very good. It's good to know, and it's good to have that in your back pocket. But it really loses people, especially if they're busy. And they don't have a lot of time to be sitting around and kind of chewing on theory. So keeping it theoretical, great. And I'm thinking of a time actually that I got saved. So I've done this one plenty, by the way, because a lot of times if you're parachuted in and you don't quite have the domain knowledge to be able to make sound judgment calls and kind of practical advice, it's very easy to kind of fall back just on theory and give theoretical kind of advice. But I was saved from this particular one in an example where I was kind of flown into a energy client for a couple of weeks, about a week. I didn't really have enough time to get fully up to speed on like the world of energy and how that works. And so I didn't really have any kind of applicable knowledge that I would be able to share, or any kind of advice, and I didn't really even know the problem space enough to be able to do any kind of coaching interventions that would have made sense. But I partnered with somebody that was very smart, kind of quickly took up the idea of like the theory of Agile, and then was able to apply that theory in a very kind of practical way. So we tag teamed when we were meeting with leadership, and we met with them kind of one by one, and we're chatting with them and then going over problems and solutions, and it was a bit more advisory, but very much like I would say something theoretical, this guy would say something actually useful, and we would be able to kind of bat ideas around with each other that way. Another surefire way to tank your coaching relationships with leadership is to point out all of the problems all at once. So this one is the one I haven't personally done, but again, I've seen this happen so many times that I thought this would be worth a specific call out. Again, imagine somebody's walking through your door and you're a very busy person, you have a lot of things on your mind, and they come in with like 25 points of all the things that are going wrong. And I don't really have any solutions for you. And I love this quote here. It's problem talk creates problems, solution talk creates solutions. It's a really great way to lose people, is just to point out all the problems without kind of helping and partnering in any of the solutions. And finally, this is one of my most infamous flops that I have in mind: focus entirely on process. So go in, get leadership's attention, and then what do? You focus entirely on the process. And I'm thinking of a time where there was clearly, I was brought into a leadership team to coach. I had like full full reign to be able to do this, and this is at the beginning of when I was being able to to coach leadership, kind of right at the beginning. Full reign to be able to do whatever I needed to do with the leadership team. Again, didn't really know what I was kind of doing, kind of fumbling right at the beginning. And rather than addressing the extreme leadership team dysfunction that was right in front of me in a lot of different ways that I would later learn to be able to do, I focused on creating a new planning cadence that they would be able to help plan on cadence more. And what that effectively did is kind of amplified the dysfunction. I think it actually made it worse throughout the entire kind of department that they were working at, rather than addressing it. Later on, got to course correct, luckily, but yeah, that wasn't a pretty situation for the time. So, right, tips for messing it all up. Arm yourself with platitudes, keep it theoretical, point out all the problems all at once, focus entirely on process. That's the talk, really. I'm happy to take questions. Hopefully these tips will help you turn leadership's frown upside down. Yeah, thank you very much.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. Let's get any of those hands up for people that have got questions, or if you don't want to articulate your question, then it's absolutely fine for you to pop it into chat, and then either me or Vlad can call it out. Okay, so I'll just give people a few moments to have a think about anything that they want to talk about. One of the things that I always think about, yeah, we can do that. One of the things that I always think about, I have a little bit of like imposter syndrome when I go and talk to leaders. And I also think that the word coach leaders is actually wrong, because I think my imposter syndrome is like, dude, CEO of a company earning £4 million a year, got like bang on record of turning companies around and doing something great, and like the tech companies asked me to go in there and have a little chat about like agile ownership within the company, and I kind of like feel like, what have I got to teach this dude? What have I, what have I got to bring? He could completely outschool me of running my business, and I'm trying to talk to him about not agile stuff, about outcomes, bottom line, customers, retention and things like that. What advices have you got there? Because I like sometimes just feel like a total fraud.
Yeah, I think that's a particularly difficult situation to be in as well, because you don't actually know what it's like to have that kind of huge level of responsibility. But again, I'm going to fall back on my one feedback slide. Again, I should have just had a one slide talk. That would have been just go in and give some feedback. But it could be, and would this be a person you've never met before, Helen? It's just like you're kind of brought into.
No, I know him. Yeah, I know him from around the business. He quite often sits opposite me in the office and things like that. So we've got the highs down to a T.
Yeah, and so and this is just kind of a great way to and to go back. So focus on maybe giving some feedback, specific actionable feedback, but also focus on helping them solve their problems. So an example, I'm currently working with our CEO on OKR and kind of cascading OKR stuff throughout the organization, right? And the approach isn't like, come on, let me tell you about how to be a leader, because this person is clearly somebody that has quite a bit more leadership experience than me. The approach would rather be like, what are you worried about? What are you concerned about? What do you think it is that is kind of working well with this and not working well with this? And what's the thought process there? And then kind of leapfrogging from his concerns. So he might see, I don't see teams prioritizing or deprioritizing kind of based on what's happening. And then we can kind of then discuss, like, oh, why is that happening? Is it part leadership team behavior? Is that part of the problem? Is it part of this, part of this, part of this? And then you're able to kind of nail down some of the issues that are happening. And then you might have an in to give some feedback or some advice there. But yeah, it's definitely not from the place of like, let me come in and tell you your business, captain, CEO running a 400 million pound company, whatever. Because but you do have wisdom and knowing how certain certain pieces of it work, right? Like, so you do know what flow should look like through an organization, and you do know where those bottlenecks would be, and you do, maybe you've done like a root cause analysis on a particular bottleneck, and you understand that there's a behavior behind it, and that behavior should be addressed. So I think kind of maybe like narrowing it down and not thinking like, oh, I'm here to coach this whole person. Is like, no, I'm here to like solve a problem.
Yeah. And I'm just going to keep asking you questions until somebody else has got a question. And like, when you're going in to speak to leaders, I can only be myself, and this is who I am. Are they expecting, kind of like proper professional super Helen, or can Helen, hands on, salt of the earth, heart on the sleeve, is that okay to talk to them like that? Do I need to channel this inner persona to make them respect me more or something like that? Or, is what you see good enough to get? What do they think?
Well, I can't speak for everybody. What I will say is that you might put on your kind of mirroring hat a bit, so understand a bit how they communicate and what their communication mode looks like. So the only kind of public example that I have from my time at McKinsey was working with the British military, and I can tell you that I didn't go in with a whole bunch of army generals and like crack a whole bunch of goofy jokes, because that can be very, very silly. And that's not what I did, because that would have not flown in that kind of scenario, right? So just kind of realizing that, right, this is the mode of communication, this is how it works. I will try to mirror that communication as much as possible so that I'm heard. And I can be myself within that. It's not like I'm kind of stuffing Daidree into a box, but at the same time, in that kind of scenario, my primary objective is not to just be me at all times and however goofy I want to be. My primary objective is actually to get heard in the way that I'm most likely to get heard.
And when I'm thinking of because you've guessed it, there's a real life scenario behind this. And I was kind of thinking, in reflection, when I ultimately got schooled by the CEO, is there sometimes a level that is just too high? Because this CEO, he's more interested in, across the business, whereas my focus was in merely a part. Is there another case where actually you don't need to speak to the CEO because he's quite far removed from actually what goes on? And in reality, you could probably just do what you need to do with the CIO and the CTO. And then that way that you can help to kind of achieve those things that you need. Is there ever a place where going too high is not actually going to be helpful?
Yeah, so, well, it would be kind of addressing where the root of the behavior issue maybe is. I guess where it wouldn't be helpful is if you've gone to the very, very top, but the issue really lies somewhere in middle management, or kind of below. And so, yeah, so you would be kind of focusing and honing in on the wrong leadership level in that case. And so you could kind of go, a step below. I guess we're, and I guess this kind of goes back to what Dan was talking about. Sometimes the team that's actually the C-suite team is the best thing to focus on. Because a lot of the dysfunctions that you'll find is actually just a misalignment in that kind of next level down team. And you might need to kind of think about that, how do I get this person more aligned with this person, so that they're working in a more holistic way, where then you'd be able to see some sort of a change amplified in the rest of the organization. Claire?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm happy to ask. It's just I wanted you to know that I had a question, so you were like, I can stop now. So I'm just going to ask the same thing that I wrote, which is sometimes I find it quite hard with leadership when I get into those C-suite situations, especially Agilists. Are they wanting our thought leadership on how to do something better? And they're paying for it. Or are they wanting coaching on how they could do it better? Any tips for kind of assessing that before you go down the rabbit hole for the wrong thing? done that a lot.
And so they've invited you in the room in a thought leadership capacity, but you think that they need feedback or something on how they could do it better?
Or vice versa. Sort of like just basically reading the kind of assessment of how, you know, should I just kind of what do you think of that? You know, asking the nice open questions when in actual fact I'm like, you know, you're just doing that wrong. And trying not to sort of like get that wrong in those meetings.
Yeah, this might be where kind of an explicit conversation might be helpful. Just to so something that I'm also a big advocate of is coming up with coaching agreements just at the beginning of any kind of engagement that you have. I'm sure this isn't like groundbreaking news for anybody, but just to like be really really explicit and not leave anything implicit around like what do you want for me? What are the things that you want me to help with? And on the flip side, what do I need from you then as part of that? And then I think a lot of times that helps to clear up any kind of ambiguity that might come later on down the line around like, ooh, I'm not really sure which hat I have permission to wear. But then it becomes maybe a matter of like efficacy. So you have to make a judgment call around like, actually, this moment is the moment that I think this hat is going to be the most effective hat. Actually, this moment, I think they just need some feedback. I don't think that they need some open-ended questions. Actually, this moment, I think they need a real solution and I need to draw it out for them and advise them around it. So, but yeah, being kind of framing it up front as much as possible. And if you're kind of mid-engagement, it's never too late to go in and have that conversation just to make sure that you're all on the same page.